Hello everyone. In today's video, we are going to understand the concept of pressure measurement. There are three types of pressure. The first is absolute pressure, then gauge pressure and vacuum pressure. And we are going to solve two numerical problems which involve calculation of absolute pressure when vacuum pressure and gauge pressure is given to us. So gauge and absolute pressure. So let's first discuss absolute pressure. Absolute pressure is the actual pressure measured at any given point. Absolute pressure is measured from the zero absolute pressure axis. So we are measuring absolute pressure relative to the zero pressure. So here we have zero absolute pressure axis. Point A represents the zero absolute pressure. So I can write here absolute pressure at point A is equal to 0. Now let's say if I want to calculate absolute pressure at point B, what is the pressure at point B? Pressure at point B is the atmospheric pressure. So I will measure how much is the atmospheric pressure relative to this zero absolute pressure. So I will write absolute pressure at point B is equal to 1.01 bar, which is the atmospheric pressure. So here we are measuring this as absolute pressure at point B with respect to zero absolute pressure. How far is certain pressure from the zero axis? Gauge pressure, or sometimes it is also called as positive gauge pressure. Gauge pressure means at a given point, if the pressure is above atmospheric pressure, that pressure is called as gauge pressure. Gauge pressure is always measured relative to the atmospheric pressure. Let us consider this point C here, where the given pressure is 2 bar. We know that atmospheric pressure at point B is equal to 1.01 bar. So pressure at point C is greater than atmospheric pressure. This means pressure given at point C is gauge pressure. Now, this means pressure at point C is 2 bar above the atmospheric pressure. It is always measured from the atmospheric pressure axis. So from point B to point C, it represents gauge pressure because we are measuring the gauge pressure from the atmospheric pressure axis. So now we know that pressure at point C is the gauge pressure. Gauge pressure is equal to 2 bar, and this pressure at point C is measured relative to the point B, which is the atmospheric pressure. So the next question is, what is the gauge pressure at point B? So the pressure at point B is equal to the atmospheric pressure. So whenever we are measuring gauge pressure, we are considering the atmospheric pressure as a zero axis pressure. So when we measure gauge pressure, we consider the atmospheric pressure axis as zero pressure. So the gauge pressure at point B is equal to 0 because it is equal to atmospheric pressure. So now the next question is, what is the absolute pressure at point C? We know that absolute pressure is measured from zero absolute pressure axis from point A. So if I want to measure pressure at point C, I will measure pressure at point C from this point A. So from point A to point B, the pressure is atmospheric pressure. And from point B to point C, the pressure is gauge pressure. So if I add atmospheric pressure plus gauge pressure, that will give me the absolute pressure at point C. So the absolute pressure at point C is equal to atmospheric pressure plus the gauge pressure. Atmospheric pressure is 1.01 bar plus the gauge pressure is 2 bar. So the absolute pressure at point C is equal to 3.01 bar. Okay, so let's solve this problem. A pressure gauge is connected to a tank where it reads 500 kilopascal at a location where the atmospheric pressure is 94 kilopascal. Determine the absolute pressure in the tank. So we know that gauge pressure in the tank is 500 kilopascal where the atmospheric pressure is 94 kilopascal. So if I add this atmospheric pressure and gauge pressure, we will get the absolute pressure. So absolute pressure is gauge pressure plus the atmospheric pressure. So the gauge pressure is 500 kilopascal plus the atmospheric pressure 94 kilopascal. The absolute pressure in the tank is equal to 594 kilopascal. Okay, so the vacuum pressure, or it is also called as negative gauge pressure. So if at any given point, if the given pressure is below than the atmospheric pressure, that pressure is called as vacuum pressure. Vacuum pressure is also measured relative to the atmospheric pressure. So let us consider this point C here, where the given pressure is 0.5 bar and the given atmospheric pressure is 1.01 bar. So the pressure at point C is less than atmospheric pressure. So this means pressure at point C is equal to vacuum pressure. And this pressure at point C is measured from point B, which is the atmospheric pressure. So we are measuring that from point B or from the atmospheric pressure. The pressure at point C is 0.5 bar below the atmospheric pressure. So this is being measured from point B. So the next question is, what is the absolute pressure at point C? So the absolute pressure is always measured from the zero absolute pressure axis. So it is from the point A. So from point A to point C, we will get the absolute pressure at point C. From point C to point B, we know that it is the vacuum pressure at point C. And if we measure pressure point A from point A to point B, it gives us the atmospheric pressure. So from here, I can write that atmospheric pressure here is equal to the absolute pressure plus the vacuum pressure. So here if you see from point A to point B, the atmospheric pressure is equal to the absolute pressure plus the vacuum pressure. So absolute pressure at point C and the vacuum pressure at point C. So from this I can write absolute pressure at point C is equal to the atmospheric pressure minus the vacuum pressure at point C. What is the atmospheric pressure here? Atmospheric pressure here is 1.01 bar. What was the vacuum pressure? Vacuum pressure was the 0.5 bar. Atmospheric pressure is 1.01 bar minus vacuum pressure at point C is 0.5 bar. So the absolute pressure at point C is equal to 0.51 bar. So let us solve this numerical. A vacuum gauge connected to a chamber reads 5.8 psi at a location where the atmospheric pressure is 14.5 psi. Determine the absolute pressure in the chamber. So here the atmospheric pressure is given as 14.5 psi. Psi is the pound per square inch. It is the unit of pressure, and the given pressure is 5.8, which is less than the atmospheric pressure. That means this pressure is vacuum pressure. So the question is, what is the absolute pressure? So as already discussed, the absolute pressure is atmospheric pressure minus the vacuum pressure. So here the atmospheric pressure is 14.5 psi minus vacuum pressure is 5.8 psi. So the absolute pressure here is equal to 8.7 psi. So in summary, we learned that gauge pressure is the pressure which is above the atmospheric pressure. When a gauge pressure is given, the absolute pressure is the sum of atmospheric pressure plus the gauge pressure. The vacuum pressure is the pressure which is below the atmospheric pressure. When a vacuum pressure is given, the absolute pressure is atmospheric pressure minus the vacuum pressure.